business or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Trulytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I have Robert Russo, CEO of Independent Advisor Alliance, with me for a fascinating conversation about how financial advisors can navigate the transition from being an accidental business owner to an owner of a high-performing wealth management firm. If you've listened to this show over the years, you know this is something that the team at Trulytics is incredibly passionate about. Many, if not most, financial advisors are still operating as solo practitioners. And for the most part, that's okay. But that model has limits and it has a shelf life. This episode offers some fantastic strategies for growing beyond the solo experience and taking your financial advisory firm to the next level. You are absolutely going to love it. Now, before we get to the conversation with Robert, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, SoundCloud, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, hit us up, podcast@trulytics.com, or we're available on the socials. We're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or again, YouTube. Go there, comment, suggest something. Love to hear from you. Okay, let's get to the conversation with Robert Russo. Well, Robert Russo, so wonderful to see you. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
I'm thrilled. And by the way, the honor of having somebody on their first ever podcast is like, I feel like it's a great responsibility now. This is so fantastic. And, you know, in our prep conversation, you wouldn't know it because you feel like a pro. So this is gonna be great.
No, I'm a rookie. I'm here to take your lead.
Exactly. Well, you know your business, you know your stuff, and some of the things we're gonna be covering today are going to be really fascinating and interesting to the audience. I really believe that. I know I was really interested when we started chatting, and I'm thrilled that Dana, who I'm not sure, she might be listening in on us while we're recording here. Yes, that Dana put us together. So I'm super thrilled. So thank you very much, Dana. This is gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So I think I want to jump into one really interesting area. You know, during our prep call, you mentioned that many financial advisors are accidental business owners, and I think that's a fantastic place for us to start our conversation. What do you mean when you say that many advisors are accidental business owners? I have my impression of what that means, but I thought maybe I'd get it from you first before we kind of just launch into where that takes us.
Sure. Yeah. I think most of the time when advisors kind of go on that independent track, they're doing so because, you know, they just want more autonomy, right? They want to remove some conflicts or mitigate them. And they really just want to control their own destiny. But in the back of their mind and in their heart of hearts, they just want to be a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And so, you know, once they start getting into that and they start to recognize that those sorts of things lead to ownership and to being a business owner, you know, then they start having business owner-like questions and business owner-like problems. And so most of the advisors that we've worked with really didn't wake up one day saying, I want to own a business. Mm-hmm. They woke up and said, you know, I want to be a financial advisor. And so I think trying to connect those two things and try to stay on path for both can be challenging, but obviously very rewarding if done well.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. So the origin story of Trulytics, who we produced the show for, is helping advisors transition to becoming a business owner instead of owning a practice, if you will, or owning a book of business, becoming a business owner. And I love some of this line of conversation because, as you mentioned, many advisors start their business off, you know, they're excited to be an advisor. They kind of like the concept of the career. Many of them started off as stockbrokers, right? Some of the advisors we have today that have built really large books of business, they got their start as
I was one.
Yeah, there you go. Started as a stockbroker, right? So
that's how I started. Yeah.
At some point in time, you answered an ad for a job, like, "Hey, would you like to be a stockbroker?" You got right. And it was a job. And then so for those advisors who decided, okay, I'm leaving the wirehouse environment, I'm going independent, or I'm going to become an RIA, and maybe they're a solo RIA. They end up owning a business, but it's kind of like more like a job that they own. They're a solopreneur, if you will. And as you and I were chatting again in prep, was that they're unprepared for like, this is a business, right? You have to start thinking about a business. You have to start doing things like marketing. You have to start thinking about operations and efficiencies. You have to start thinking about your talent pool and things like transition and succession planning, right? That's going to be a real deal for you. So what have you seen, with your team there, in terms of the advisors who end up working with you? What's the shift in mindset that they've had to have over the years? And maybe you can tell your own story about how you shifted into that mindset of business owner.
No, I definitely shifted. I think kind of when you're on your own and you're kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And when you start to see the maturity, not just within the business, within the practice, you start to recognize that there are probably people that can do individual jobs better than you can do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so where it's really eye-opening is when you kind of let go of the vine, so to speak, and start to trust others. And that's where really when you can scale it up. And that's when you start to feel like a business owner.
Yeah.
And so what's really cool about this business, right? We don't have some obstacles that other businesses have. We don't have inventory.
Yeah.
We don't have unions, right? And we have relationships. And so focusing on just the relationship to the fact that that's a business is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And so I think, if we can continue to focus on relationships, which is the reason the clients hire us, right? I mean, it's not alpha and beta. It's, I like Russo or I like Joey or whomever it is. If we can focus on that and then try to find those other people in those other areas, like you referenced earlier, like marketing is a really good example. Advisors aren't typically the best marketers. Yeah. There are some good ones, but usually they go out, they find somebody with some talent, and now they have a marketing person, and it kind of accidentally expands.
Yeah.
And then you wake up one day and you look back and you're like, wow, I own like an entity, like a legacy type business. And if something were to happen to me, this business could potentially carry on past my day. So it's really interesting though. And that goes back to that accidental business owner.
Yeah.
It's fun to create. And you wake up one day and you're like, wow, this is actually working pretty good.
It's funny. You talked a little bit about like, because so the things that's happened sort of because they have to happen. Like this, over the time, you're like, I got to do some marketing, right? I've got to bring on some clients, and it's not just sales alone as in doing it. I always say marketing sows the seeds for sales, right? So you've got to have a presence. You've got to be thinking about whether it's your presence online. You're going to think, do I have an email newsletter? Do I sponsor the local youth basketball team type of thing so they can have my name out there in the community and those types of things? So you actually start dipping your toe into marketing activities. And some of it comes, just because it just starts to happen. And some of it happens because of friction, right? They start running into like, hey, I've hit a wall, right? Like I'm this one dude, I've got 100 clients or so. I've run out of time. So, maybe the first thing they do is they hire an assistant or a junior advisor, and but just now the business is complex. It's not just them anymore, right? To your point, you're leveraging somebody else's effort, but you're also starting to feel some growing pains.
Anytime you bring on an employee, you're going to experience some growing pains.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get, two people on the same page with the same vision, executing in the way you both would want to execute it. And now all of a sudden you're HR.
Yeah.
Right. And if the advisor world, we're not necessarily the best in the HR world.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're a relationship, right? We try to have a little bit of fun when we can.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of having a very process-driven business is really a unique concept to an advisor brain, at least in my opinion, because we typically are relationship sales, kind of more strategy and big picture. So you start to get down to, all the HR stuff, whether it's compliance or, payroll vendors and, different ERISA type plans and things like it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah,
just a totally different ballgame.
It totally is. You're right. It is fascinating too. So for many advisors, they work their whole career and they're solo, but that doesn't mean they don't need kind of like support behind them in order to be a high performer, right? Again, as I mentioned, everybody eventually hits some sort of point of friction, whether it's a wall that they can't get over, or they're starting to think about life differently and they want some different things out of the business and so forth. And one of the things you and I talked about that I'm really excited about, I think this is the primary reason why you're on this show, by the way, is to talk about helping advisors perform better. Back in 2020, I published a solo episode of this show, the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, titled "What Wealth Management Firms Can Learn from Auto Racing Teams." Now, this was like the early days of the pandemic, and I was just, like everybody else, like binge watching stuff on TV. And I discovered all the racing shows, the Formula One Drive to Survive series on Netflix and other ones on Amazon and yada, yada. So and I've always been a racing car fan. So I mainstreamed a ton of racing stuff. But in that episode, right, it kind of hit me that like there's some parallels between high performance drivers, say Formula One, which is really popular now, and advisors and what their respective teams do to support them, right? So in the Formula One world, there's all sorts of support, right? How quick is that pit stop? And how quick can I get you back out there? How much adjustments can I do? And testing can we do on the car so that we make sure that you got the fastest car? And what's the strategy for tire replacement and blah, 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 blah. But I think the same thing is true here for, firms like yours, Independent Advisor Alliance. You are, supporting your team of advisors and helping them become high performance advisors, just like the drivers we see here. So, many wealth management firms, sadly, take a bit of an arm's length. So I wonder if you might be able to talk a little bit about what you and the team are doing to help your advisors boost their performance and maintain a high performance business.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, we do have to treat them like business owners because what we believe is that our role here is to help business owners execute on their vision.
Yeah.
Right. They maybe just don't have the resources or the time or the talent to help them execute. Right. Yeah. So from an overall perspective, that's really the gap that we're filling in the industry. And advisors being a relationship driven business, they have to spend time with their client. Mm-hmm. Them coming up with marketing strategy or social media and all these other elements that can kind of start pointing them in the wrong direction that aren't all that profitable, right? We need to find something for them to outsource that, or we call it insource because we're a partner, not a vendor. And so when you look at building around those resources, it's if you're doing anything outside. So we have a marketing division, right? We call it Creative Capital. And Dana, who's part of our PR team, right? She's part of Creative Capital because we put the PR stuff inside of the marketing. But if you focus on all of those elements that are not considered kind of in a producing relationship role, we got to be able to provide structure and support. Additionally, just from a framework, are you familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System?
No.
Have you ever heard of that before? So
vaguely, no. Tell me.
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting because a lot of what we do in this whole business owner environment is trying to help them be better business owners.
Sure.
So we're not going to be able to go in, especially me, right? I used to be an advisor, obviously not a very good one because it's past tense. But a lot of advisors, their focus, is going to be very different, right, in terms of what they're doing day in, day out.
Yeah.
And so the EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, is a way to keep you on track. And it's a structure of IAA, Independent Advisor Alliance, that we kind of bring down to the advisor level so that they can really have that same level of structure as we do, but still ultimately control kind of what happens in, day out. So making sure that we provide that structure that they can run in, that they understand, hey, where do I spend my time?
Yeah.
I can outsource compliance to your firm. We charge $32,000, right? Well, does that make more sense than going out and hiring, a chief compliance officer for $100,000, $150,000, $250,000? We think it does. Some people might not agree. But trying to find all of those areas, and that EOS is really something that I think a lot of advisors, if you're listening to this podcast, check it out. It's just a really great system to make sure that even if you're a solo practice, that you're making the right decisions for the right reasons. If you are an employer, you've got all of the people that are on your team are kind of rowing at the same speed in the right direction. And everybody understands ultimately the outcomes that you're looking to solve for. And, advisors typically in their mind, they know what this is.
Yeah.
It's just pulling it out and formalizing it and getting it out of their head and getting it to their teammates so that they can kind of hop on board and help them execute it as well.
I wonder,
So
I love everything about that. How do you go about helping an advisor identify what might be slowing their business down or holding their business back from what they want to achieve? Do you have any processes in place for that?
we do. So every advisor that we work with does get a business consultant, and that business consultant has different steps that they would walk through. So they would be able to speak better than I would, but I believe there are 7 different areas, right? One could be office, one could be employees, all of those elements that essentially make up the day in, day out practice and business. And you really try to benchmark yourself and try to figure out where are some efficiencies, celebrate the things that you're doing well in comparison to your peers, and really just learn from your peers.
Right.
You don't really have to recreate the wheel. Getting some of that information is going to be very helpful. But also, I think having an accountability partner.
Okay.
And, that's kind of our argument about kind of that solo practitioner isn't that they can't do it. And it's not that they can't do it well, but having somebody else that you're holding yourself accountable, right? They say you write it down, you're more likely to do it. Well, if you tell somebody, you're way more likely to do it. And so having that accountability partner that can take stuff off your plate and really look at things, right, that are not their own. So like this podcast, right? This is your baby. And you have a vision for it and you're going to follow that. And if you hear from a third party that, hey, what if you tweak this? You're like, oh, I never really thought about that.
Right.
And so you start to expand kind of that whole brain trust of how you're doing things.
I love what you were just talking about there about having an accountability partner and also benchmarking, right? Looking outside of your business and getting a new perspective, because it's so important. We are all conditioned to, or I think it's probably by nature, to just stay in a comfort zone. Like once you reach it, hey, this works. I've been doing it this way for a while. I've got my system, right? I get every quarter, money is deposited into my account, fee billing is run. Wow, life, this is just pretty smooth. And before you know it, you can look up and like, did 10 years really go by? And you haven't thought much about it. And the world has changed, right? So you might think you're doing just fine. Like, hey, I'm making good money. I have a pretty good lifestyle. But if you were to benchmark your business against others in your peer group or advisors who have a similar size book of business, you might find that, wow, we are not as profitable as we should be here. I am overspending on office space, let's say, versus what advisors are doing in 2022. And, I'm underspending in technology and other marketing or whatever. So it's really important to, occasionally look outside yourself, and having that other partner come in is really a smart idea.
Yeah, I think most people do, maybe just not in an overly formal way, right? They're kind of paying attention for the most part. And what's interesting is when we started looking at more of that benchmarking approach, we don't necessarily find folks that are trying to do something, let's say, cheaper, or even in some cases, they're not even trying to create revenue. What we've noticed, and this is a turn since the pandemic, but what we're noticing is people are trying to find, can they make the same amount, spend the same amount, but spend a lot less time doing it, right?
Sure.
And so I think people are starting to look in the mirror and recognize, hey, if I can pick up an extra 3 or 4 hours a week, that's going to be way more meaningful than becoming 2% more profitable or some number, right? And that's been one of the big shifts that we found in terms of what advisors are expecting out of our business consulting engagements. They want time.
Yeah.
Not necessarily money, which is interesting. That's a change.
Well, and look, sometimes people say this with negative connotation in mind, but I don't. The notion of a lifestyle business. This business as a financial advisor can be amazing, right? You get recurring revenue, right? You get, hopefully you're working with clients that you actually like spending time with, and you hope that they are achieving their goals. And you can depending on what your lifestyle is, you can work a normal, 40-hour work week, make a very good living. You'd be in the top 1% of income earners. And that doesn't stink, right? So picking up an extra 3 hours a week is not not bad,
No, and that's the industry without having, again, there's no inventory.
Yeah.
Right. You're not having to deal with any kind of movement, logistics. I mean, it's all between your ears.
Yeah.
And, you're picking up the phone, you're calling, in many cases, buddies, friends, family, and naturally you're going to be talking to them anyway. So to be able to weave in, hey, let's get together next month or next quarter to kind of do a formal dive.
Yeah.
Those are the working hours, right?
Yeah.
It's those behind the scenes. And that's where I think advisors can pick up time.
Yeah.
Once they recognize that those calls and those meetings with the clients are important, what led up to that? What did you have to produce? What did you have to show in that meeting? And if you can have somebody else do that, if you start to look at, when you do the business consulting exercises, you start to say, okay, a $500,000 revenue advisor, GDC, however you word it, production, you start to realize what the hourly wage is. I'm not real great at math, honestly, but it's, what's that about? Let's just call it about $250 an hour.
Okay.
Most of the stuff that they're doing, they can hire somebody for $50 an hour, $100 an hour. And so that's where, they can get some time back. And the people that are doing it, that are in that, are going to be more excited to do that work, because the advisor brain is typically more excited about having that next conversation with the client.
That is such an important observation to make, that making that switch to, like, your time is really valuable, and there are other people who are willing to do it for less than you can earn in that hour. It's, I'm not sure if you, are you aware of the firm, the company HubSpot, which they power a lot of websites and analytics and so on. So I happen to know the founders of HubSpot, and Dharmesh Shah is one of the founders. And he's told the story a lot of times. When he was a young guy, he grew up in Alabama. And so it was kind of a weird, interesting thing where he became a coder. He was interested in, coding at a young age. And so, as a young man in his early 20s, he's making hundreds of dollars an hour. And he started realizing, like, what I need to do? I need to stop doing the things that I don't like to do, or things that I can pay somebody less than whatever. Let's take $100 an hour or $250, like you were saying. If I can pay somebody less than $250 an hour to do that task, I'm going to do that, right? So he hired a housekeeper, right? So somebody else is going to do the vacuuming, because he didn't enjoy that. He hired a lawn crew, right, to mow his lawn. And these are little things, but to your point, picking up a couple hours a week, I'm not cleaning my house, I am not mowing my lawn. Guess what? I can do something else with that. Now, whether that is doing productive work, like making $250 an hour, or just, hey, now I've got more free time, I get to enjoy myself, I get to decompress, I can read a book or whatever. Really, really important stuff.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
And we've all done it, right? I mean, we've all done it in some capacity. I certainly don't cut my lawn anymore.
No.
That would be, that wouldn't be a good sight for the neighbors either. But yeah, I believe in it. Outsourcing or as we call it, insourcing, and make a spread. And, advisors, they do a lot of financial planning. And for an advisor to sit down and enter in, you do a real financial plan, there's a lot of data entry, right? There's a lot of data entry. And I would rather the advisor spend time on the results of the data and help maybe think creatively about what to do with that information than put the information in the technology.
Yeah.
There's no sense that, you can hire somebody for a lot less than that $250 example in order to do that and make it happen.
And maybe you just gave the answer. What do you think is the big aha moment for many advisors who start doing this? Is it something like that, like data entry, or kind of getting the plan where they go, this feels a lot better than having somebody else do this stuff, or having a partner like, I'm just independent advisor lines. Okay. I'm going to struggle on the IAA.
It's okay. It's all good. Yeah. I struggle on it too. In fact, give up a little insight. So our email address is mine is rrusso@IAARIA. Okay. And the problem is that's IARIA. And so you have to be very careful how you say that to some others. But to answer your question, so when advisors, typically when we meet an advisor, they're coming from, whether it's a wirehouse, a bank channel, or some sort of a unique independent space. And, they're holding on, to the dollars that they make, right? They're just holding on a little tight. And once they first recognize, gosh, if I were to go out and bring on not just an admin, but a good admin, and the difference between an admin and a good admin is pretty dramatic, and not that much in cost, but I mean, in terms of performance and abilities and things like that. And they hire that first admin. Once they recognize how that actually will affect them 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, the next hire is going to happen pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But seeing an expense side to the business is going to be new, right? Because they're used to saying, all right, this firm takes 60% of my pay. They, and they receive that 40% and it's all theirs. So they don't necessarily care who is hired, how much they spend. But that first time they write the check, that first time they become the employer, it's scary.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand that. I've been there. I've done that. So, but once it happens the first time, and then they start doing the calculations in their mind, because ultimately they're math people, they're going to get pretty excited, and they're going to start to look elsewhere for a lot of different things.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting for me is when I see somebody who's better at stuff than I am. And when you're like, oh, you did that.
It's depressing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Oh, you did that faster and better than I do. And, wow, that's magnificent. I always say, I jokingly say, like, I have a kind of in my head, kind of like a list, like, can you do it faster and better than I can? Absolutely worth paying you for. But I also have what's the consequences of Mike Langford screwing this up? Like, what if I do a crappy job on this? Like, what is the consequence? Let's say that if I'm going to do something around the house, like a DIY type project, it's like, if I mess this up, is that going to be really expensive or really dangerous? Right. So maybe I'll have somebody else do that. But I think that's very true in the business too. Like, what are the consequences of me doing a poor job? Well, on a podcast, as an example, right? In the editing process and so forth. Well, if it sounds like crap, people aren't going to want to listen to it. If you didn't do a good job of putting together the video and making it look nice, you're not going to see as much engagement and interest and all the like. So why don't you have other people who are better than you do that type of stuff? It'd be great.
Well, who did your entry? Who did your entry to your podcast? I love that.
Oh, the intro?
When I watch your podcast, the first, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to actually find out.
Did you do that?
We had that for a couple of years. I did not do that. No, we hired somebody to do that.
See?
Yeah. It's not me.
And that's powerful, right?
Exactly.
It's powerful. If you watch that and then I come on and speak, you find like this is like a real thing. Yeah. If you just heard me speak in a random window, you'd be like, who's that? What's that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got some great graphics and all that type of stuff. And it really matters. Hire somebody. Yeah. Look, I could probably tinker around and get something, but like hire people who know how to do graphics, hire people who are better at video editing. And it's not just their time. It's that they are really good at it. And to your point, they have, some people have a passion for doing certain things. I jokingly talk about I am fascinated by the number of people who are petrified to do what I do. Like, I think getting on a microphone or getting on a stage or on camera and talking, this is awesome. I love this type of stuff.
Yeah.
There are people who would sooner die than get up on stage or get on a camera and talk. There's no way they want to do this type of stuff. And for me, it's easy and it's actually kind of fun. Yeah. So, but some people.
I get it. And I think when they were talking about things people are most scared of, I think they say number one, public speaking. Number two is death.
Yeah.
There was some sort of a stat and I'm not the best, or do I love public speaking, but I would drop that much lower. I wouldn't want it anywhere near the death component because it's not quite there. But yeah, well, it can be tough.
Jerry Seinfeld has the famous thing about that statistic. He's like, that means at a funeral, more people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. That's
it's
right. 100% true. It is, but it's really true. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit here, but it's still kind of staying related. Very few financial advisors have an identifiable brand. And we talked a little bit about branding at some point in time, talk about from the lens of marketing. Advisor typically have their name or maybe the firm's name. They have, if it's a multi-person entity and they've got XYZ Financial or what have you. But it's often said that a brand is the emotional aftertaste of a set of experiences with you, right? And if we return to my racing parallel, because I'm a racing nerd, if you think about why somebody might be a fan of Red Bull versus Mercedes, and I'm not sure if, you're following Formula One. I am. I'm here in Austin, and Formula One's here in Austin. So it's, and I am a Mercedes guy. and one of the two founders, Truelytics, Jeremy and Ian Carnell, they're both Red Bull guys. And I tease them all the time. I'm like, hey, listen, first of all, I can't drive a Red Bull. Sorry, I can drive a Mercedes. It's fine. But when you think about the branding, it's kind of interesting, right? Red Bull has this brash, young, flashy, a little bit fiery type of, there's a funness to it. Whereas Mercedes is a bit crisp, more exacting, a little bit more, I guess, elegant, if you want to call it that. It kind of feels that way. And so, I tease those guys. We go back and forth, and it's a fun joking around with each other. Anyways,
right.
How can financial advisors kind of have some brand connection that's similar to, the clients in their community as, I guess maybe not as significant as Mercedes versus Red Bull or whatever, but like, what do you see, with branding and how advisors can create that, I guess, emotional aftertaste?
Yeah, hard to compete with Mercedes and Red Bull.
No, you can't.
Not that it matters, but I'm a BMW fan, so that's one thing we would probably.
They're not in Formula One. Well, I tell you what, when we do other racing classes.
So I think branding, just from a root perspective, and I hear this from our creative capital team, it's going to be the consistency.
Yeah.
Right. That's the first thing. Right. You go into an Apple store, they use that as an example. It's going to be glass, clean, white. And whether you're doing in this industry, whether you're doing social media, blog, your website, if you're speaking at a podcast, something like this, you just want it to be, you've heard it before. It sounds exactly the same. There's a belief behind it. And actually was, I think while we were emailing, I was actually in Louisville, Kentucky at the Barron's conference.
Okay.
And they had a really cool branding platform that they went over and brought in. The guy was great. Randy Goldberg with Bombas, the socks company. Yeah. He was great because he was very personable up on stage and kind of talked about the reason he did what he did. And he was kind of joking around. He didn't grow up one day hoping he could own a sock company. Right. That wasn't his mission. And so what happened with his scenario, and that's just where I'll draw a parallel, is, he said, I'd really like to solve for some of the issues in the homeless problem that we have. And he found out that the biggest requested item was socks. And so he built a whole mission and campaign around helping homeless by donating a pair of socks. He said, he's glad they didn't originally say underwear because he'd have an underwear company, which he's obviously expanding into that now. But he didn't grow up wanting a sock company. He grew up wanting to solve and help an issue. And so really his message, and I really believe that he's got a lot, it's powerful, is a lot of people in our business do this to help people, right? To solve for things, but they've got to be able to figure out what makes them uniquely different on why or how they do it. And there aren't a lot of people out there that have done that very well.
Yeah.
Right. I think our business in the branding world is still very much in the third inning.
Okay.
So, I would, number one, I would look at making sure that the brand can be multi-generational. It's not location based, depending on what what your goals are. But if you're trying to build this out as a true business, be careful tying it directly only to you as a person, to you as a location, because as you continue to grow, you want other people to adopt it and believe in it.
Yeah. And
so for Russo Financial Group, advisors wouldn't want to necessarily leverage our firm if it was Russo Financial Group. Marketing is really, really tough. Branding is really, really tough, but you really have to believe it, and you have to be able to say it the same way multiple times, multiple mediums. And I'm learning myself.
Yeah.
Right? I was that accidental business owner. And so where I am in my phase is kind of taking a step back and recognizing that these are the things that we need to be doing.
Yeah.
But it's a great opportunity because not a lot of people do it well. And there are some advisors, even within the IAA network of folks, that really do a great job.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things
that guy, Randy, was great.
Was he?
He was a great speaker. Yeah, he was great.
Make sure you send his link or stuff over afterwards. I'll make sure we get it linked up in the show notes so we have kind of like the context of that. Would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I think about with branding, and I wonder if you agree, is it's, do the people who come to your website, to your office, to your see your brochure or whatever, do they feel like they're in the right place, right? Like, and I say that because, so much about what we recommend in this industry is, hey, you should have some form of niche. And that doesn't necessarily mean I only serve, certain people from, certain communities. It can be, I solve a certain types of problems for people who have these types of problems, right? So people who are in the tech industry who have a lot of stock options, I help them plan for that, whatever, concentrated wealth or something. It can be any number of things. I work with people who went to Boston University. That's my thing because I'm a BU alum. Take your pick. But the language and the visual, you mentioned the Apple Store, right? A lot of glass and bright lights and all that type of stuff. There should be some consistency in that, right? So when I go to your website, does the language you're using, does it talk to me? I always joke about like, listen, in this industry, we call our customers clients. Right? In other industries, they call their customers diners, patrons, guests, sometimes customers, right? Sometimes users is what they're called, right? So when you're using language and referring to them and their business and the things that they do, make sure you speak in their language because that will help shape that branding concept there. So it's anyway, it's a fascinating area because I agree with you. Very few advisors really have an identifiable brand, but there's so much opportunity.
And I think as the independent space, right, the business owner space grows and becomes more mature, you're going to start to see it run a little differently because people will be bringing on, marketing teams. And, if nothing else, if you're starting out and building a brand just to provide kind of that credibility, it's terrible. I mean, my day job is a recruiter, right? I go out and try to find advisors that would hopefully leverage our firm. And, I'm looking at their websites and, there's misspellings. There's other items. So I think just trying to focus on some of the details, be consistent, making sure that it provides credibility. And then the next level is, okay, well, how are you uniquely different above and beyond you can read and spell, right? Right. I mean, that's table stakes, I think at this point, I hope.
Yeah, exactly.
But the credibility's there. You don't know. We have a lot of different folks.
It's too funny. Well, it's like, it even comes down to based on like the way you're dressed. Like you're wearing a nice button-down shirt there. I'm wearing a polo shirt. But if your target market is, suit and tie type folks, well, you might want to throw a suit and tie on. And I know it sounds basic, but like if you're marketing to a tech audience, as an example, like, well, you might want to just t-shirt and sneakers might be fine. And you might actually make them feel uncomfortable if you show up in a suit and tie at their office. I remember, I'm blanking on his name. First name is Brian, but it was a Morgan Stanley firm. And they had the Google stock option plan. Like they had got in really early. And so this firm handles Google. And so at one point in time, he was meeting with one of the clients, one of the Google executives. And the guy just looked at him across, the table. He's like, listen, you've been my advisor for like 10 years. Why haven't you evolved? He's like, you look the same. Everything feels the same here as it did 10 years ago. You're still handing me these paper, statements and so forth to go over things like, I work at Google. Why haven't you evolved as a business? And he said it was very, very eye-opening for him that they needed.
How did he respond?
Well, he was. Do
you know?
He was just a little uncomfortable.
A little taken back. Yeah.
It's like, this is really true, right? But it kind of goes back to the thing we talked about earlier on in the podcast, where we just get comfortable with the way things are, right? And if you're not innovating, if you're not thinking about, I need to innovate to push this business forward, as a Google does, like Google can't rest on its laurels, because there is a possibility that somebody else emerges and eats their lunch on something, and so they have to constantly innovate and push things forward. But for our industry, we do have a little bit of a luxury of, I can go slow, right? It's a lifestyle business, but left unchecked for too long, it can be problematic, right? You might lose a client and have no idea why you're losing him.
Well, you don't want to be archaic, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah, that's never a good look.
Well, especially as you mentioned, the multi-generational thing. If you're archaic and all of a sudden, grandchildren are going to be taking over grandma and grandpa's estate, and they're like, this dude really old.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to
switch. You can't tell them to wait for their statement for 30 days. They're going to want digital access and
exactly. I know we're getting close to the end of our time together, but I have a couple of things I want to make sure that we hit upon. One is like, what do you think are holding some advisors back? I mean, the wealth management industry, kind of like unlike what the Google exec told the other advisor there, the wealth management industry has changed a lot in the last decade, right? We've seen a lot of technological advances. We're seeing new products, new solutions, new ways of interacting, as you mentioned, mobile and online access and so forth. Yet some financial advisors are, they're kind of slow to adapt or so forth. What are some friction areas that you see for financial advisors that are kind of holding them back? What are they wrestling with, and how are you guys helping to kind of get them over the hump there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is that idea that to spend money to make money, right? I mean, they're viewing like a P&L in its current form. They're not forecasting,
sure. Okay.
Right? The dollar spend can be $2 in revenue. So I think that's a really hard thing. And again, that goes back to thinking more like a business owner than a financial advisor who has a practice. So us trying to help them and doing some analysis and talk about, where do you spend your money? Is it marketing, right? I mean, that's obviously only one of many options.
Sure.
Is it in financial planning? Are you spending your time, doing data entry type stuff? Are you offering Robo? And that is one of the interesting pushbacks, because when Robo first came out, if you really think about where the world was maybe 10 years ago, and Robo was probably about 10 years now, right? You think about 10?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of when it became. So, a lot of firms viewed Robo as competing against financial advisors, and therefore some really didn't, implement it into their practice. But us trying to make sure that they understand, no, the Robo world, which we offer a Robo for all of our advisors, is a helpful world, because what it does is it allows you to give advice, keep expenses and costs low to the client that are typically in very less complicated situations. So you have grandma and grandpa, and they have a really large estate, and they have everything taken care of. But maybe their granddaughter or grandson, they're starting out learning how to invest. Well, that one day was going to be your client.
Yeah.
Right. If you do this right, that's going to be your client. And so having that Robo, getting them directly connected to it, and not viewing that as competition, but viewing that as an opportunity to work with them, give them some sort of advice, some component. And then when their life becomes more complex, that's when you can then start to really do more from a planning and investment strategy perspective. But so I think Robo is a really good example of advisors taking the industry and viewing certain things as competition when they should be leveraging it and utilizing it in their practice. So I would say outsourcing, spending the money, investing the money, believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And then don't view everything that's out there as competition.
Yeah.
Try to leverage it and see if you can incorporate it into your practice.
I love it. I love the way you phrase that too, as you're thinking about it as an investment, right, in your business, because to exactly to your point, like, look, if a trend is taking off, there might be a reason behind it. So it either can be consumers like this. They like this experience. Okay, which consumers? Are they your consumers? And if you say no, like my clients don't want Robo, they want a white glove touch. Okay, fine. But to your point, are the grandchildren using Robo? And if they are using Robo, why do they like it? Is it because it's flashy and easy and it's on their phone? Maybe part of it. Is it because it's cheap and accessible? Because advisors who charge 1% AUM won't work with them because they have no AUM to charge 1% on, right? That type of thing.
They don't get attention. Yep.
Yeah. So it's worth thinking about. So to your point, if you bring in a solution, like how can I serve this next generation that will be growing? Because most people will stick with their financial advisor forever, so long as that advisor is giving them the right attention and the right service. So you might grab somebody who's 25, who at 45 might inherit few $1 million, might also be in their peak earning years and be making tons of money on their own. Awesome. You get to be along for the ride. You had to pay the price at the beginning though. Yeah, invest in the beginning.
Yeah. I think Robo is a really great way to build those relationships over time. I mean, you're going to see children being born. You're going to see weddings. You're going to see those things. And that's just kind of like, we would call it the bench, right? It's the next person up. And, you don't need to do as much complex. It's not going to take as much time. And the way that robos are typically set up, you're just checking in and saying, hey, when something happens that makes you scared or nervous,
Mm-hmm.
you've got my cell phone number or my number, and you don't have to call 1-800-BETTERMENT.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we had a lot of clients at the time, you would view when we had a lot of market disruption during the beginning of the pandemic, the joke was advisors would tweet, hey, well, what do you think about that, automated platform now? And the reality is they still like it. They just want someone to call and say, is my money still there? Because it looks like it was down 10% today. And I want to make sure that I'm seeing this accurate. They just need help explaining it.
Sure.
So I think just trying to leverage some of those digital capabilities is going to really help advisors. If they can do it now and get in with them, they're going to see a lot of things. A lot of things will come to fruition down the road.
100%. It's, last little note on this, it's a scaling opportunity, right? It allows you to serve more clients at lower cost. And to your point, for the most part, the average financial client doesn't want to talk to you that often. They want to hear from you. They want to know you're there. They're busy. Yeah. They don't want to be on the phone with you. They don't want to be coming to your office. They don't want to be FaceTiming or Zooming you as much as, we might like to imagine. They want you to be there when they need you. They want you to check in occasionally. So these tools can take, kind of as you started saying at the beginning, right? They can allow you to be more of a business, to add some efficiencies, to operationalize some things that you might have been doing manually in the past, and kind of take those off your plate and then free up some of that time.
You say it better than me.
I get paid the big bucks.
You should be.
Big bucks.
Yeah, we have a business development team that we're adding here. So just let me know.
Hey, look, we will produce a show for you too. It'll be awesome. We'll be out there talking about it all the time. Closing things out here, I want to make an observation, and this is a compliment to you and to many other leaders in the industry. And it's really just been on the top of my mind lately. And I just want to get your take on it. The industry we're very vibrant and exciting. Despite what some folks outside the industry might think this is kind of a boring industry, not to me. It's exciting. I'm constantly amazed at the innovations, the new businesses that I've never heard of before, the new products I've never thought of before. And I've been in this industry for 26 years, right? It's like, wow. Just when you think there's no more to be had, boom, new stuff comes. I recently had Natalie Wolfson, the CEO of AssetMark, on the show. And she, like many other wealth management leaders, was extremely open, and yourself, you're open into the community for sharing some of the things that they're doing, some of her insights, some of the things that they're learning. And it was really kind of one of those things that, like, oh, we're sharing more. Like, that's an innovation in this space. Whereas, because I remember the early part of my career, we were very walled garden, right? We weren't going, other than like maybe operational stuff, like, hey, what are we going to do from compliance and what have you? Like when social media was starting to bubble up, or email for advisors, all the compliance people got together and go, what's best practices here? That type of stuff. But what do you think is the cause of this newfound kind of attitude of rising tide lifts all boats? Executives like yourself, leaders like yourself, get on podcasts and share kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all learn from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, they say, right, if you copy one person, it's plagiarism. Two or more, it's research, right? And so, I just think we're in a spot where information is plentiful.
Yeah.
And so when you can be somebody that gives it, I think you're given a little bit of your status elevates, right? As somebody that's willing to share. And so there's some selfish reasons behind it. We all acknowledge that. But, we want to advance this industry, right? We want this industry to continue to be successful. We're not at the level where you have attorneys or even CPAs.
Yeah.
And in order to get to that level where individual consumers or clients or users, view us, we want to be elevated to that spot. And that's just going to take all of us kind of pitching in and sharing the resources. And sure, we compete, but we do it a lot more respectfully than was done when I first became into this industry. And ultimately, here's the thing: I can tell everybody, my recipes, my cookbook, and all that, but you got to execute on them.
Sure.
And if you're really doing your career because of a belief system and a mission, that can't be copied because that comes from the inside. So. Our firm, as an example, so we're a flat fee firm, very unique in the industry. We charge $32,000. I don't believe in overrides. Well, the competing firms, when we talk to these advisors, will say, well, we'll go ahead and do it for that same fee. But it's not just the fee, it's what it represents, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the business owner, it's the knowing your future, it's understanding future cash flow, it's all of these things. It's our belief system. They might match a price, so to speak, but it's not going to be able to connect to all the things that you're doing in the same way. So the model can't really be replicated.
Right.
And so, it's execution, it's belief, and all of us sharing in the data will hopefully help every one of us evolve our belief system and become better. But no one's ever going to do it the same way.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Somebody mimics you. I mean, it's kind of, I guess it's a great compliment.
Yeah.
But you can't do it. You can't do it the same way, right?
Yeah. Well,
there's only one original.
That's right. Well, and let's hope, to your point, to the execution point, let's also hope you have the relationships are solid, right? Like, I should be able to match you on the price. So there's lots of businesses that are doing exceptionally well in the world that have the exact same product at the exact same price for the most part. But for some reason, you prefer Coke over Pepsi or BMW over Mercedes or something, whatever that's branding. Exactly. It gets back to it.
It's that feel. It's that feel, right? Or the taste you get afterwards, as you mentioned.
That's it. The emotional aftertaste. Well, Robert, this is
emotional aftertaste.
Exactly. That's not my quote. I'm stealing it from a whole bunch of other people.
That's good.
It's funny when
it's called research.
Yeah, it is research. It is really funny when you try to find out like who's the person who invented this phrase, because you've heard it from so many other people, and then people credit this guy, and then somebody says, "Oh, I heard it from this guy," and you're like, I don't feel like building the tree of like who was the original. I'm just going to go with, you know what? It's been said by somebody. It's not my thing. So anyway. Well, Robert, this has been absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed having you on the show. I have a feeling,
it was fun.
Yeah, me too. I have a feeling people are going to want to follow up with you. What is the best way for somebody who's interested in talking to you and the IAA team, or just hear from you and collaborating? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah. Obviously, our website's got information. My email is rrusso@IAA, not IARIA, right? IAARIA.com. LinkedIn, I do LinkedIn. Reach out to me there. We'll meet you in whatever medium's appropriate. We have Twitter, so we're at Independent Advisor Alliance. But I'd love an opportunity to talk with anybody, and I really appreciate being on this, and thanks for being gentle on my first time.
This is fantastic. Thank you very much, sir. Have a good one. Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. Huge props to my man, Robert Russo, who did a fantastic job on his first ever podcast experience. Awesome stuff. Great having you on the show, Robert. I really appreciate the generosity of sharing everything that you're working on there at Investment Advisor Alliance. As we talked about to close out the show, rising tide lifts all boats. And this was a great example of the industry kind of giving back and being open and trying to help all of us grow our business, okay? As I mentioned at the top of the show, if you have a question or suggestion for a topic or a guest, please don't hesitate to send those in, podcast@truelytics.com, or go to truelytics.com and use a little contact form there. Love to hear from you. And if you haven't done so already, like and subscribe to this podcast. Go there, click the little like button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, the YouTubes, wherever you like to hang out. Love to get your review, and of course, love to hear from you. All right, that's it for today. Hope you're having a great day. Please stay safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.